owner. We look at things and act differently when we are an owner. And yet most people who go to work every day, probably including you, don't have any real or significant ownership in the company from an accounting standpoint. But we are not an accounting podcast. With respect to our accounting friends, this is a leadership podcast, and creating ownership away from the finances is something we definitely want to create. Today, we are talking about that ownership and how we can create an ownership based culture. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders like you and organizations like yours grow so that you can lead more effectively and make a bigger positive difference for your teams, your entire organization, and the world. If you are listening to this podcast, you could join us in the future live on your favorite social platform, or at least perhaps one of your favorite social platforms. You can find out when those are happening, how to get in the loop, and how to get involved, and find out how to get this information sooner, information like this sooner, by going to our Facebook or LinkedIn groups, two of the platforms where these take place. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to get all the scoop, to get all the dates, and to join us. And if you like what you're hearing today and you want help in developing the leaders in your organization, let's talk. You can reach out to info@kevineikenberry.com. It'll get to me and we can schedule a time to learn more about your needs in your organization and see how we might be able to help. With that, let me bring in my guest. His name is Greg Hawkes, and he is a keynote speaker and author, more about that in a second, and a corporate culture specialist. For more than 25 years, he has partnered with organizations across the country to reshape culture, deepen trust, and activate ownership mindsets. He works with companies of every size, from ESOPs and credit unions to Fortune 500 corporations and national associations. And is the author of a new book, Act Like an Owner: 5 Unblocks Creating Culture People Love and Results Leaders Need. That's a good combination. And so today, Greg is our guest. I'm happy that he's here. Greg Hawkes, welcome.
Kevin, what a pleasure and privilege to be here. I love seeing all those little tabs in the book. You probably have more tabs than I had when I was editing it. So I love
Well, here's the one thing. I have read it since you have. I'm confident of that. I say that to people all the time. I say, this isn't going to be a book report, though. It really won't. But I do want to start with the book.
That sounds great.
And that is why the book? Let's start here. What's the big idea of the book, Greg?
The big idea of the book is that having an ownership mindset is the best way to live life. Like, that's the big idea of life, whether at work, in your personal life, in your relationships, in your aspirations, in your parenting. Being an owner is by far the best way to approach life.
But wait a minute, I don't have ownership of everything. So we probably, I went through this little thing in the opening about ownership and accounting and finance. I was trying to be semi-clever, but I was also trying to be clear about that. But in order to get really clear, I need to have you tell us about that. When you say ownership, or to think like an owner or act like an owner, what do you mean?
Well, the 5 unlocks are really the idea in it. So I won't do a book report either. But the premise is that, a financial return or investment is only one small aspect of what it means for us to own our life, in the decisions we make, in the way we respond to the situations, circumstances around us, the way we reach for responsibility, how we think about our role in concept with the overall business we're a part of, and the relationships that we have. And so the mindset enables us to take chances, take risks, be confident in our approach, and have a willingness to go above and beyond just status quo and mediocrity.
So I often will say on the show that there's usually at least one thing in every book that I read, certainly every book I read in preparation for the show, that it will be the thing that I won't forget, that I won't forget. And there's a couple things here. And one of them comes right out at the beginning. You talked about an owner. You have a background of owning investment houses as investment property.
Yes.
And you talk about that in here. And so from that comes the metaphor, if you will, of you say that there are really three kinds of people
Three
in
kinds
the
of
houses
mindsets.
that you
Yeah.
rent, but also in life. So
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
let's start
Yeah.
there. And in
Okay.
my life, I've often talked about two of the three, but not the third. And I think it's
Really?
really, I mean, not in this way like
Hmm.
you are. So let's talk about those three, because I think that in fact, before you say those three, for those of you that are listening, I just want you to listen to Greg's description of these three mindsets,
Hmm.
behavior sets of people, and
Hmm.
think of the people that you work with that maybe you say, hey, I already see people in these spots. I don't want
Yeah.
us to label people. At the same time, I think it'll be helpful for you. So, Greg,
Yes.
with that long introduction, what are the three types of behavior sets?
I love that phrase, behavior sets instead of mindsets. I guess it's that combination. Well, there are owners and there are renters and there are vandals, Kevin. That's what they are in the workplace. And you are correct. People, when I start using that, they immediately start mentally associating the terminology with people in their organizations. Of course, my shorthand description of it is that owners bring their heart, head, and hands. They're people who show up with the skills and gifts and talents they have, but they also have curiosity, imagination. They bring passion and care. And people who show up with a renter's mindset, which statistically is every other person in the workforce, they show up with their skills. They do a good job. They show up to work on time. They get what's done, what's needed, but they have decided it's not worth caring. It's not worth investing their imagination. They're not using creativity to go outside of the realms of solving. They're just like, I'm just doing my thing. And then, of course, vandals, they bring destruction. They bring divisiveness. They bring strife. They bring the toxicity that people like to talk about in a workplace because of a variety of reasons, but they are there, and an undercurrent of what's diminishing. And really, what I would say is the reason why more people are renters and not bring an owner's mindset has more to do with the vandals' freedom than any other thing.
Okay, so say more about that. What you
Well,
just said, I think that is worth us diving into a little
it
bit more.
totally, and I mean, you're a reader, so I suspect you've done Malcolm's the 25-year, the Revenge of the Tipping Point, right? The Gladwell philosophy on those little things. And what people get really excited about in work is like, how do we get these disengaged people engaged? And so they focus on this big part, whereas Gallup also has this actively disengaged, which correlates with my owners, renters, vandals. And they put all this energy on like, what do we need to do get the disengaged engaged? And like Gladwell talks about, the reality is when you mess with the percentages at another place, it tips over to create a whole landslide in an area corollary or peripheral to it. And so my philosophy is target the actively disengaged, the vandals, reduce that number. And you can see it in Gallup's 25-year study. When vandals are reduced, owners go up and the renters stay the same. That's what's shocking about it, because what happens is you reduce those that are actively disengaged, and those that are disengaged go, hey, look, they're not putting up with that. They're not tolerating that. They're not letting those kind of toxic people. So I'm going to give myself and invest back in. And so it has that kind of impact in an organization. And so that's the shift and the twist that I think most people miss on getting the disengaged engaged.
So vandals can do one of two things. I mean, expanding on what you just said a little bit, I think
Mm-hmm.
they can either be, if we think about them sort of in a hierarchy, we got the owners at the top and the renters in the middle and the vandals at the bottom, if you will. If we First of all, we can remove vandals, and if we remove vandals, well, that's good all the way around. But let's just talk about people that we help make a shift, right? So if we help a vandal, sometimes if we get people to no longer be actively disengaged, sometimes they become the passionate ones. Like they jump to the top, right? And sometimes they,
Sometimes.
not often, but when
Yeah.
they do, here's the thing I want to say about this. Here's the example I want to use. Almost all of us have an experience of having a bad customer service experience that turned around correctly, made us a passionate fan of the company.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are opportunities there. I don't think that's what we should be shooting for. I think we should just be trying to shoot them to move them up so they're no longer a negative weight in the organization. But
Yeah.
we have to recognize that can happen.
My philosophy is, and again, my experience in owning property and in the workplace, once a person gets to this vandal level, I'm like, let's arrest and evict those suckers. Let's just get them out the house because they're going to cause more damage. And they've broken trust to a point where it's just like, it's not worth it. And, as you read in the book, there really are four, I've found, right? It's not deep research, but I found 4 reasons vandals live in a home at work. Because literally when owning investment properties, you're like, why would I let a vandal live in my house at all? Why would you put up with that? And, my quick 4 are, they're revenue generators. They've been there a long time. There's a nepotism element, and either or they're the owner or leader of the company, right? That's the very brief version of it. They can find more, but because they are producers, that's the reason people tolerate that kind of behavior. If they weren't generating something for the organization, they'd be like, well, get you out of here. You're negative on all around. But they produce in a way that then makes it difficult, because leadership, that's what I love about talking about leadership. There's a lot of friction and tension on, hey, we keep hearing you complain about this person, and they're a toxic individual, and they're not a team player, and they don't care, but also they're producing high levels. They've got clients that they've nurtured over the course of time, and they're big providers for our organization, or they've been here decades and they have a heritage and a legacy. And so it's really awkward to do something about it. And so there's a lot of tension in leadership. So it's not easy. I say arrest and evict vandals. That's not easy at all, because they're usually providing something significant that then creates that difficult. If they were just a pain in the, then a leader just be like, you're gone. But that's not the reality at all for vandals.
Yeah. The one thing that I would say, and you can respond to this as you wish, is that the only challenge that I have when we label people as owners, rentals, and renters and vandals is that once we've decided that, we're part of the problem, right? So that's why I'm like, man, there is a point where we have to cut bait on the vandals, and as hard as it is, as you just described, which I completely agree with 100%. And there's absolutely a time we need to do that. And I think as leaders, we have to, and as organizations, like I've seen organizations that they get rid of people as vandals before they even really know that they really are.
Yeah.
And there are many leaders that wait way too long, which is really the crux of your point.
That loss aversion. We're afraid of, like, should I?
Well, but it's also like, do we believe in people's ability to change behavior? Right. And so there's a tension there. I just want to acknowledge that as I read, although I agree with everything you said, that tension is there, because I'm very careful about the difference between behavior and people.
Yeah.
And what most of the time we label them as people. And if once we've done that, it's over.
The challenge I find, Kevin, is that most leaders aren't collectively self-aware enough, organizationally, not individually, that the environment of the organization has created that in the people. It's not that the people came in bad spirited with a desire to be toxic person. Nobody comes into that. So they come into this environment and then they go, oh, there's a competition internally that's been set up, or, oh, the way they evaluate and measure things here requires me to be very self-centered and very focused on just my numbers and my results and what I'm doing. And so what leaders, when they look at people and they think that, when I talk about renters, I'm like, listen, they come in day one as an owner, but then the perversity of an organization, they learn to be renters because of the culture of the place, not the person. So I fully agree. Don't label people, but recognize these mindsets and take responsibility as leadership on, does our environment produce renters? And that happens way more than not.
So let's talk about that for a second. How are we unwittingly, certainly unintentionally, creating renters?
Let me count the ways. One of the biggest ways is, one of the first ways I should say is diminishing contribution. People love to contribute. Where they contribute, they buy in. Right? We use that language, Kevin, all the time. We need you to buy in. We need you to own your role. We need you to own this vision and this goal. And yet then ownership comes also from contribution. If I get to have a say in it, or I get to have a voice in it, or I get to be listened to, then I have an obligation internally to go, I was a part of this strategy, this idea, this approach, this product, this service. I'm certainly going to be all in. And the reality is most most contribution, I'll say when I'm speaking, we mostly have bad ideas. We think they're good because they're ours, but we mostly have bad ideas. And to have a good or great idea, it takes a lot of other voices, perspectives, people to contribute to it. And so having smart leadership, and this is why I love your podcast about leadership, because smart leadership learns the balance of how do I invite people to contribute thoughts and ideas, and also balance it with, most time the answer is no. Most time the answer is we don't have the manpower, the resources, the money for it. But how do I create this environment where there's people that like, I love the opportunity to contribute and know that if I land on something or spark something, it will grab some legs and we'll run with it. And otherwise, we'll just put it on the shelf, put it in the idea box. But at least it's a space that says, we value your thoughts and opinions.
So there's, as you hinted earlier, and if you had already read the book, you said all 5 of them sort of very quickly. There are 5 keys. It's the subtitle of the book, the unlocks to create a culture that people love and results leaders need, meaning the ownership culture, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have time to go into all 5, but we need to talk about, I think we need to talk about the third one, which is reach for responsibility, because if people don't have that figured out, you can't get from to there. You can't get to ownership, and people don't see that world that way personally. So let's talk about what you mean by reach for responsibility.
Well, it's so interesting. That's the one you center, because I believe that's the one most people associate with, like, this is what it looks like to own it. And when I'm speaking, just to step back a second, I'll just put up pictures of 2 different families in front of a house, and I'll have the audience speculate. It's like, which one do you think's the owner, which one do you think's the renter? And without fail, one will say, well, because of what the yard looks like on that one, they're the renter. And what someone will say, what the yard looks like on that one, they're the renter. It's literally, they'll take the exact same information and have exactly the opposite guess of what it is, an assessment. They'll use the same data. And so in work, we do that also. Like when people say, this is what it looks like to buy in, or we need you to own it, then how a person interprets that could be entirely different. So this idea of reaching for responsibility, is central to not being, in some of our corporate speak, I'm not limited to my job description. I'm not just a 9-to-5er. I'm willing to go above and beyond. But again, I put the onus on leadership, because I believe people do want to give their best on a day-to-day basis because it's most fulfilling for them. And yet what leadership has failed to do is recognize what the return is on the investment. So some of the language also uses, like, are you investing your life at work, or are you spending your life at work? Because as investors, we go, well, what is my return? What am I getting back from this? And every single one of us want a return. Even if we're at the top levels of leadership, we're doing it for a reason. And you have a little acronym, EFROG, that is my editor was like, are you sure you want to use that? Like, it's easy for me to remember. So that's the most important. And it's the emotional, financial, relational opportunities and growth. And so us as humans, we're way more motivated by things than just money. Some people, so this idea of reaching for responsibility, as you know, Kevin, and being in leadership for years, there are people who have a sense of themselves. It's like, I'm a go-to person. If something goes wrong, I want to be the person you call, because I like seeing myself that way. I like being someone who is, if it's not even in my department, but there's an issue and you're like, this guy always gets it done. This lady, she always figures a way out. Man, there's an emotional hit with some people that are like, I like being seen that way. I like living in that. And I like what that produces in me as a person. And so I get a big return on being that, because most people are like, who wants to do more than their job? A lot of people. There are a lot of people who are looking for opportunities. You've got Gen Zers. Some of them are like, I'll do more just for the opportunity to be in the room with somebody I wouldn't normally be in the room with, be on a project I wouldn't normally be in a project with. And so I want to reach for that, with no financial benefit at all, but with the idea like, hey, there's a future in that. And some of us, Kevin, that have been around a while, we also just like growing. We're like, I'm a lifelong learner. I want to be exposed to things that are hard and difficult, because I will grow. I know I have to have external things that stretch me. And so put me in a position, or put me in a place that's tasking that of me, because I don't want to get lazy. I don't want to drift into mediocrity. I want to keep being stretched beyond what I am. And growth is a high value proposition for me, even though others are like, why do you Why do you do more than you're being asked? Well, it's very easy. I'm reaching for that responsibility because that's what I believe keeps me fulfilled and keeps me filled up and keeps me motivated as a human. And so, as leaders, knowing that about the people you lead then enables you to ask them to make sacrifices, because we live in a world where it's like, well, who wants to do that? A lot of people want to go above and beyond when they get the return that really satisfies them.
I would even say, and I have observational data, not research data, to back up what I'm about to say, that in a world of, in a post-COVID world, if you want to call it that, where people are working more apart, they actually want that more. That need that we have, to make a difference, to be a part of something bigger than ourselves, to add value in meaningful ways, to feel like I'm doing something that makes a difference, is an even, it's not a bigger need than it was before, but other situations that we used to be in the workplace made it easier to see that than we can see it now.
Yeah. And it just was met. It was met that way. And it's an interesting dynamic because I've got kids that are Gen Z and just young in their careers. And my son specifically moved to Chicago. So it was a new city for him. And he was working in a 100% remote place. And he was like, and the idea at that point was like, oh, Gen Z loves being remote. They got the freedom and they can do it. But he was like, I need to be around people that can help me, that I can watch, maybe even like mentor from afar, and have connections with people. So he literally left a job that was remote. So he went to a job that was 3 days in the office because he just wanted to be around people that would help him learn, grow in his career. And as a young person, you're like, I'm like, that's a good move. That's great to get around and do that. And so having a ownership culture that recognizes the things that come from that, the young leaders get from that, it's really, really important.
I read that story in the book. And the reality is that my daughter is in exactly the same spot. She actually lives in Chicago as well. But she starts a new job in a week from today, as it turns out. Yeah, a week from today, 2 weeks from today, maybe. And one of the things is now she's going to have to be in the office 4 days a week. Before she really wasn't at all. Yeah. And I had told her in the past, I said, Kelsey, at some point you need a job. You need to have the experience of doing that from a career perspective. Not that you can't advance.
Right.
Working from home.
Oh, no. Yeah.
She is now super excited for all the reasons, Greg, that you just described.
Yeah.
There are 5 keys. We talked a little bit about one. We don't have time to talk about all of them,
right.
But there's one other one that I want to talk about.
Oh.
And it's because so many people talk so much about silos at work. And you spend a little time talking about this. And here's the interesting thing about silos to me is that a lot of times I always say to people, if people are wearing the accounting t-shirt or the marketing t-shirt or this Kansas City t-shirt rather than the company t-shirt, they're working in a silo. Now they happen to be excited about and even feel a sense of ownership, but only for Kansas City marketing or accounting, not for the company. So let's talk about that one and how, and you call that widening the circle. And it's even connected a little bit to your other one called Think Whole House.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about how we help people as leaders move beyond what actually looks pretty good until you step back and look at the broader picture.
Yeah. And that, Kevin, is really, we talk about one falling on leadership, that it's always going to come back to smart leadership, relational leadership, people that have relational equity and have built that in their growing into the position that they're in. But that idea, silos, it's an interesting dynamic because a marketing person, we don't want working in accounting. That is not what we want. We do not want them in that room. So there's a reason they're in the room they're in, because they're skilled, they're gifted, they're experienced, their education. So the challenge with the silo is not the renter element, the hands, right? Not the thing that's like, this is what we hired you for, this is your education. It's the heart and head issues that say what keeps people separated when it comes to our business. And that idea of I'm wearing the accounting t-shirt because, as an accountant, you're like, that's what you hired me to do. Like, that's what I'm able to do. That's how I provide value to us. Why are you giving me grief about loving my room? It's like, this is it. And so, oftentimes the challenge with the silo is then the contribution that's made. I've got a friend that calls them the gaps, that the money's in the gaps, that in between the marketing and accounting, that gap, if there's not a crossover of communication, understanding, appreciation, and validation of what both bring to it.
Head and heart, more than just hands, right?
Totally, totally. And that's a leadership. I mean, leadership is head and heart. I mean, that leadership is the place that says, how do we access these and how do we resource head and heart? And so that idea of how do we strategically connect people in a way that says, we want you killing it in accounting. We really do want you doing your job well. We want you to understand it in the context, so that the value you're bringing is for the whole and not just in this little window you look through every single day, whether it's at home or in the office. And your total scope of our business is your room.
So for leaders, I want to make two comments. It's really easy to think about this for others, but I want to talk to leaders for a second for yourselves. Number one, make sure you're not doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Make sure you're not living inside of whichever silo it is that you were hired, and what's the first word on your job title. Make sure you're not doing that, number one. And number two, don't assume. The assumption we make is, I see the whole thing, so everyone else must see it. I promise you they don't. They can't.
No.
We have to help elevate their line of sight, elevate their perspective. Once they see it, they can't unsee it. But until they can see it, they've got no chance. We can't assume they see what you see.
It's so interesting you say that, Kevin, because sometimes leaders are like, I see the whole thing, so they don't need to. They just need to focus on their little room, and they just need to trust me, and I'll see it all. And so instead of them, the people that they're leading in a partnership of ideas of understanding the whole, they're being micromanaged, if you will, and tasked, because it's like the leader's like, I got the big picture. You guys just trust me. Just do what I ask you to do. Just stay in your room. Whereas their ability to contribute significantly they'll have the greater perspective.
And and the core underlying mindset of that is actually designed, often, not always, meant to be helpful, but the unintended ripples are so unhelpful as to be a problem, right? So I want to grant everyone who's listening some grace there if you're hearing yourself in this, but we have to help get past it, because if we can't ultimately be successful. Is there any other one thing, Greg, that you would say, thinking about this organizationally, is there a specific organizational point that you'd like to make based on what we said, or maybe based on something I haven't said, before we start to wrap up?
I think it is the leader's best task is creating the environment, shaping the space, because we can talk about all the hand elements and all the details, but if you just create an overall environment that produces people who are empowered and thrilled to buy in, the details of a lot of it just are taken care of. It is culture shaping that creates an environment for people to thrive in. And so, that's what my hope is with the book, that it's empowering with the ideas of how to create the entire space. Yes. I love that you have all those notes. I haven't seen that before. I appreciate it.
So tell me, I mean, we've been talking about your book, but tell me what you're reading these days.
I'm reading this book, The Right Kind of Wrong. I heard about it a couple of years ago. Amy Edmondson, and it's a failure book and she's so smart. And the idea, and honestly, I'm just at the beginning of it. She's referencing a story about when they just were starting to learn how to do open heart surgeries, and the machinery that they had, and the kids that they were in, the failure, and like people are dying, like it's literal life and death. And it feels like startling to read, and the point is, here we are decades later, and like, open heart surgery and on all the tools that can let the heart keep doing in the lungs, like we don't even think about it. But literally people lost their lives in the experiments. It was life or death anyhow. But you go, okay, so I think about my level of failure. It doesn't have that kind of consequence. And what am I learning from the little failures that I have? So I'm just in the front 3 chapters of it. But I because the conversations around failure are always really interesting because people love talking about it, but they don't love doing it.
How do you learn? Well, you learn from failure, but I don't want to fail. Like, don't talk to
No.
me about that.
And nobody genuinely is like, man, I really appreciate you wasting our time and our money, and that we lost that business with the client. Thank you so much for failing like that within our company. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's not a response people get.
We'll have a link to Amy's book in the
Good.
show notes. We'll have a link to Greg's book in the show notes. So, Greg, where do you want to point people if they want to connect with you, learn more?
LinkedIn.
Where do you want to point them?
LinkedIn is the place. GregHawks.com. The book is on there. ActLikeAnOwnerBook.com. They're all point to the kind of the same area. Yeah. And so I think that's it. And I love LinkedIn. So I'm glad we're here on this LinkedIn Live because as the podcast is being recorded.
Yep, absolutely. So that's a reminder. If you came in late, I said it at the beginning, if you want to get information like this sooner, in this case, like 2.5 months sooner, if you're listening to the podcast, if you're watching us,
it's happening now.
You're all good. If you're listening to us, if you connect with me, remarkablepodcast.com, excuse me, Kevin, remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn, or just make sure you're following me. Make sure you connect with Greg and I both, and you can get this kind of information sooner. Greg, before we go, I have a question for everyone other than you.
Okay.
And it's the question I ask people every single week, I guess kind of in absentia. And that is, now what? What are you going to do as a result of being here? Because you've been here for 30-ish minutes and you may have found us mildly entertaining, which I think we probably both hope. But ultimately, that's not why we were here, right? You could find a podcast is probably more entertaining, but what you may not find is a podcast that can give you more practical advice if you take it, because you may have, hey, I thought of this. I thought those are all good things, but none of it matters if you don't take action. So It's our hope that you will act on something that you got here, because that's an ownership mentality that says, hey, there's something I can do. So I'm going to go do it. And so I hope that you will do exactly that. Greg, thanks for being here.
Totally my pleasure. Thank you so much.
And so everybody, that also means one more thing. That means if you were here today and you found it valuable, you got to come back. And it's very easy to come back. You can connect with me on LinkedIn because I'm here on a regular basis, but you can also make sure you're subscribed wherever you're watching or listening so you don't miss any future episodes of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.